welcome to the Bf108. So what are we going to cover in today's video? First of all, we're going to talk about a bit of a history of the Bf108, then we're going to take a look around the aircraft, take a look at the EFB, some of the features, and then we're going to do a quick flight, just having a look around the aircraft and how she handles in the air. So without further ado, let's get on to the history of the Bf108. The Bf108 has got a very interesting history. It was introduced in 1934 and entered service in 1935. Now, why was it put into service? Well, of course, they wanted an aircraft that filled this niche. It was also built to compete on the International Air Challenge that was effectively a touring challenge to try and show off how good you could build an aircraft like this. And that's where a lot of its unique design characteristics came from. We're going to come to that later. It was commissioned at a time of real not very good time for aircraft companies. We've just had the massive depression in 1930, so any aircraft orders at that time were really important. It was designed by one Willy Messerschmitt of the Messerschmitt Corporation, as you would know with all the designs for the Second World War. Now that also links into the Bf108. When commissioned, he knew that this aircraft could be an experimental testbed for ideas and thoughts that he had for a fighter that will be made in World War II, which is known as the Bf109, hence the next aircraft. And there are lots of characteristics of the 108 that are carried over. For example, these leading edge slats, they automatically deploy when angle of attack gets too high to bring the stall speed down. And that's exactly what went onto the Bf109. And actually, if you start looking at the wing and a lot of the design of the aeroplane, you start to see some real striking similarities. And that was for good reason. They were using this as a testbed. Now, during the war, it was used as a reconnaissance aircraft and also a trainer. It made an excellent trainer and also made a very good reconnaissance aircraft. With it being praised for its good handling, good endurance, and just overall very nice aircraft to fly. After the end of the Second World War, many nations from around the world used them in that same role, including the RAF, the Japanese Air Force, the Spanish, the French actually continued production after the war because they were such a good aircraft. So really it had a very broad usage throughout its entire life, all the way up to the end, and is still today seen as a very desirable aircraft to own, fly and operate. So let's take a look at the exterior. What sort of things have we got on that make the Bf108 unique? Well, there's quite a few things, and we've also modeled quite a few of these things that you can see inside Microsoft Flight Simulator. One of the things I like, it's a small thing, is we have this sort of rain dust cover that goes over the aircraft. Now, when you load in and you're inside the cockpit, you actually can't see out the windows because it's obviously covered in a cover. But I kind of like that because you're kind of starting with the aircraft cold and we could have to remove this to get the aircraft going. The other one is as well, curtains. Now, anyone who's flown a light aircraft with a glass roof will know it sounds like a fantastic idea because you have brilliant visibility. Soon you realise it's not such a fantastic idea because it's like being put inside a greenhouse that you can't get out of and you're obviously unobstructed view of the sky. So it gets very, very hot. So, thought about this, and the Bf108 has these curtains that are installed over the top of this canopy, which you can either extend, retract, or remove entirely because they were fitted as such. Different modifications of the Bf108 had different ones of these fitted. I think it's a really, really nice feature that we managed to get in there. The other thing I love in here is just look at that leather. That looks like quality leather seats. It looks like I can almost feel myself sitting in them, and the really thick German leather, almost like an old Mercedes. That's what it looks like to me, at least. I've just imagined it inside my head, but they look pretty good. And the aircraft was known for being a very comfortable aircraft to operate in. Now, if we come round to the front of the aircraft, you'll notice a pretty comprehensive panel and something that was very, very rare for any aircraft in the period, and especially not a fighter aircraft: retractable landing gear. Now, why does this matter? Well, if you have retractable landing gear, all of a sudden your cruise speed, your fuel, everything is better. It's better for everyone apart from maintenance and the person that has to actually pay for the aircraft, because obviously it adds a bit more complexity. Now, this was one of the first light aircraft that wasn't a military aircraft to have it fitted. So they have a little indicator on the ground that says ground flight, and they were quite worried that pilots would accidentally land with the gear in the up position. I'm sure that happened. I can't see any reports of it, but I'm absolutely certain that would have happened. But still, a very unique feature, and that's what this handle here does. Now, if we look back up at the main panel, there's a few modern instruments that we've integrated in here, like a radio and a transponder, things like that. They weren't obviously fitted from the factory in the 1930s, but every single Bf108 that's still operationally flying now will have a version of these fitted, so we've neatly integrated them into the aircraft. The other really nice feature, you can see at the moment the panel is in German and is in metric, because that's how it was built. But I hear you say, I don't use the metric system. Well, we have an option for you. You can actually change the entire panel to be in imperial, so knots, feet, what would be in a standard aircraft. And this is an actual thing that people retrofitted into their Bf108. So we're not making this up. This is something that people have done, but you can have the choice to have one or the other. So it really is up to you. So now we're going to take a look at the EFB, the iPad that's inside the cockpit here. Now, first of all, I might hear you say, I don't want an iPad in my Bf108. I just want to fly it as it came from the factory. Absolutely, you can do that. And there's a button we have over here, just like on the P40, and it will remove the iPad so you can fly with a completely clean flight deck. This is the options menu as such though, so if you want to show it, click it again, and this is where we interact with the aircraft's systems, maintenance and things like that. So we're going to go for a quick overview, but it's very similar to the one we have in the P40, but customized for the Bf108. So I'm not going to cover every single feature here. We've still got the map, the timers, and all integrated into here if you want to use them there. And we've also got the options for the aircraft specifically. So stowage, wings, we'll come to that later, and also the different colors that you can have on your covering, you know, the one we saw at the start of the video, which I think is really cool, you know, to actually match the repaint, or you want to try and put it in your hangar, have a different bit of customization, that's selected here. So we're going to move on from the EFB now, and we're going to take a look at the exterior of the aircraft. Now, the exterior on the 108 I think looks fantastic. It's quite an interesting looking plane. It's pretty striking, because to me it does look like what it is, and I'll explain what I mean by that. It looks kind of like a fighter that someone went, we need to make this more comfortable and fit 4 people inside. So that's why it's a pretty unique design. Now let's talk about those folding wings, because that's a pretty unique design feature of any aeroplane. Why were they fitted? Well, remember at the start of the video, we talked about how the Bf108, specifically the A model, was built to enter the endurance race, the French endurance race. Well, one of the features of aircraft in those races was most of them had folding wings, because you would score extra points if you had this. So that's why the Bf108 has that carryover. But it also has the added benefit of, if you want to store it in a hangar, it's pretty good. You can fold the wings up and really store multiple of these. You can think about how many of these you can get side by side by side compared to a normal light aircraft. So really cool feature, and it fully works inside Microsoft Flight Simulator. Moving around to the front of the aircraft, if we peer through the little cowling, we can actually see the engine. It's 3D modeled and textured inside of there, and it's an interesting engine. It's an Argus AS10C engine, and it is an inverted, so upside down, air-cooled V8, which is 12.3 litres, something like that. So really quite a unique setup, especially for a light aircraft, and especially for one in the 30s. It's got 174 kilowatts or 233 horsepower, which is significant. That is a significant amount of power for the period. Now, this engine actually has a really cool, unique sound that we'll get to hear on the takeoff, but it allows the aircraft to go up to a maximum speed of around 165 knots and to cruise at around 140 knots. Now, they may not sound that impressive, but for 1934 and for 4 people and a lot of fuel being able to be carried, they are incredibly impressive numbers. The fact that they're not embarrassing in 2023 should say a lot. Now let's talk about the construction method on the 108 for a moment. It's an all-metal construction. I might hear you say, so what? Well, again, for the 30s and it being a light aircraft, that is rare, very rare, and it also being a low wing was even rarer. I think the thing that interests me, when you look at the aircraft, you go, yeah, it looks normal, you know? Yes, but it's very, very old. And for it to look kind of normal now is extremely impressive. A lot of the contemporary aircraft in the period were made of wood or fabric or partly metal or all metal, but then they would have a high wing with a strut brace. Not like this, which is pretty unique for the period and really gave it that edge on the speed. So that's finishing up the exterior overview. Let's move back into the cockpit now and talk about the checklist system. So like the P40, we have fully integrated checklist system from Microsoft Flight Simulator. What does this mean? Well, you can run through the checklist in what's called evaluation mode. So it will go through the different items, highlight them for you, and you can click them, or you can use the autocomplete function. That's fully integrated into the 108 and is by far the best way to learn the aircraft. You can hop in, click autocomplete or click evaluation and really understand how to fly this aircraft within a matter of moments. And I think it's great, and it's integrated here fully. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to do a very quick engine start, then we're going to taxi out, do a takeoff, and just do a little bit of flying in the air to show you the handling on the Bf108. So engines are all ready to go. I've done the checklist just up to engine start, has an electric start, which is again very impressive for the period. So we're just going to open the window, make sure the area looks clear, yeah, looks good. All right then, so let's start the engine. And there comes alive that inverted V8. And you can really hear, if I give it a little bit more power, it's a pretty unique sound. So next, I'm just going to taxi out and you're going to join me ready for takeoff. Okay, so we're just holding short of the runway, but I just want to show you the flaps, how you set them, because it's kind of interesting. It's this wheel here. So basically, you can set it, and as you can see, there's a little display here that shows you the setting. So that's 10, which is what we're going to use for takeoff. Pretty interesting. And the other side of that is the pitch trim, which you can also see has a little window that shows you there. Again, pretty advanced. That's kind of the theme of this, but a nice system. So let's taxi onto the runway and take off. Okay, so here we are ready for takeoff. Let's slowly start to add the power. Okay, start to rotate, up we go. Okay, we've got a good climb rate now. As you can see, it's pretty sporty when it gets off the deck. So now we can put the gear to the up position. Remember, that's pretty rare and pretty advanced for this period. So we look down at the gear selector and we can select the gear to the up position. And now the gear will go up. This is a mechanical system, so it would be hand cranked up. As you can see, climb rate is in meters per second, which is a little unusual. That's because I have the metric gauge, the original one that the aircraft would have come with. Okay, I'm going to just bring the nose down now and start to trim forward a little bit. Bringing around 3-4 meters per second climb rate, something like that. I'm going to bring the flaps in. Okay, flaps going up. Again, it's just a mechanical system with the wheel. Really nice, simple, but good way of doing it. As you can see, look, we're pretty starting to accelerate. We're climbing now, and we're already about 670 kilometers per hour. And now I just want to talk a little bit about the handling of the aircraft. So I'm not putting much input on the stick, but you can see you get a fairly good response back. So it's this, I'm not going to call it strange. I was going to say strange mix, but it's not the right word. It's a good mix of sort of sportiness and stability. It's like a touring sports plane. That's the best way I can describe it. So I'll show you what I mean. I'm really not having to put much inputs in here, and it's flying really nicely in trim. But let's, for example, say I put quite a big input in. Whoa, you can see that's quite dramatic, so I have to be kind of careful. So if you push it, it really will do what you want. So nice quick rolls like this, you can see it's no slouch. But also, it can be a wonderfully stable tourer, which, I don't know, what more do you want from an aircraft? So let's just pop onto the outside for you and listen to that V8 engine. final thing to mention is, as with all of our ini products so far, this is using the CFD flight model, which allows that really nice, accurate, smooth inputs as you've seen across the board. So it's just a really nice feature, again, to be integrated into this aircraft. Finally, before we end up this video, the aircraft comes with quite a few liveries already included with it, which span across the aircraft's usage, from this one which we're in today, which is the Swiss one. We have an RAF colour, loads of other ones here, just as you can see on the screen. So these will all be included with the aircraft. So thank you very much for joining me, looking into this very interesting part of history with the Bf108, which will be available in stores soon. Thank you very much.